Hi, I'm David Miller, and I'm a school director of human development and organizational studies and education at the University of Florida, as well as a professor of research and evaluation methods. And today I'm here with our co-host, Tammie Cumming, to do the Next Generation Assessments Web Bites. And the Web Bite topic for today is policy impact on fairness in higher education.
Thanks, David. Hi, I'm Tammie Cumming. I serve as the Associate Provost for Institutional Effectiveness at Brooklyn College of the City, University of New York. And it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce Dr. Michelle Asha Cooper, who serves as Vice President for Public Policy for Lumina and also the Executive Director for Lumina's Washington, D.C. office. Welcome, Michelle. So happy to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm really delighted to be here.
All right. Today, I thought we'd just start with our first question. And our first question is, what are some of the current challenges and obstacles that you are seeing in higher education policies and practices that need to be addressed to increase and improve attainment and outcomes for today's students?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. It's a lot in that question. There are so many challenges, and there are also so many opportunities. At Lumina Foundation, we are working to revitalize higher education so that it is accessible, affordable, and high quality for all students. In our recent release of Stronger Nations, which was just released last month, well, actually not last month, actually in January, we report that degree attainment after high school has steadily increased, and that's really good news. And it shows that with intentional, data-driven, and evidence-based efforts, we really can increase in degree attainment. Lumina has invested in many of these efforts. We have supported many of our partners and many others, and we see that it's making a difference. That is the opportunity right here. We need to ramp up and double down on many of these efforts so that we have more opportunities for students to move to and through college, especially students who are from backgrounds that are students of color, low-income students, and adults. So that's the big opportunity we have in front of us. Now, the challenge, one that we acknowledge even in that same report that I just mentioned, Stronger Nation, is that while degree attainment over the decade has increased, unfortunately, disparities among racial groups continue to remain significant. For Black and Brown students in particular, there's still some challenges. We, in many cases, know the reasons for this, and so I believe that we can do something about it. But in the midst of all of this, in the midst of what the data is showing us, we have to contend with the impact of COVID-19. Granted, many of these challenges that we are talking about were certainly with us before the pandemic. They are not new. Things like mental health challenges, hunger and homelessness among students, and the growing cost of college and student loan debt. These were things that were problems before the pandemic. And I would be remiss if I did not mention the enrollment declines that have been a topic of much discussion throughout this moment in the pandemic. In the midst of all of that, too, we still have 39 million Americans who fit into this category of some college and no degree. So when you put all of this stuff together, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a big challenge for higher education. And we also have to remember that context does matter. And right now, we are navigating these data and these trends with a growing politicization of higher education. In some states, there has been some challenges to how higher education is governed and what can be taught and by whom. Even as we speak, the U.S. Supreme Court is debating two issues very central to higher education. So there is a lot happening, and it's happening at all levels: the federal level, the state level, and at the institutional level. But even in the midst of all of this, I'm a glass half full kind of person. So I believe that this is an opportunity. As I mentioned earlier, it's an opportunity to double down on these efforts that we know make a difference. And it's an opportunity for us to work together to make sure that we are doing things that lead to strong and meaningful outcomes for today's students.
I really do agree with a lot of what you're saying. So I'm from at the City University of New York. We're considered an engine for social mobility. We have a lot of underserved students, traditionally underserved students with economic hardship, and it really makes a difference. And yes, enrollment continues and is now a bigger challenge than ever before. And I think we're at a critical juncture right now in higher ed overall. I think COVID really did magnify some of the disparities that people have been talking about for decades.
That's right.
Time has come. What are we really going to do to make an impact and have an effect? David, I'm sure you have something to chime in on. You have something different at University of Florida. I don't think your enrollments are as challenging as we have here, but you have your own issues as well.
Yeah, I think everywhere we go, we have different kinds of challenges, and certainly we have a lot of challenges here in that we don't always see the enrollments we need, the diverse enrollments that we need. That is sometimes, and so it's difficult to sometimes to make sure that we're making the right changes and things to really increase those enrollments there. But it's well beyond enrollments, as you well know. Of course, there's what do you do after you get there. And that's just a huge issue for I think everywhere, but something that we're certainly focusing on is what can we do to make sure that everybody has equitable opportunities to succeed and to get through.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask, you've written the book Becoming a Student-Ready College, and it's really the name of the game, I think, if we're going to involve the students, the obligation that we have when we admit a student to see them through.
That's right.
To be retained and persist. So what needs to change, Michelle?
Yeah.
What really needs to change in order to ensure diversity, equity, inclusion, or fairness on campus so that these students can be successful?
Yeah, so you both talk about what you're doing at your respective campuses, right? So what you're doing at Florida, what you're doing up in Brooklyn College, and we know context matters, right? So I just want to put that out there, that there is no one size fits all proposition for any campus. Context matters. One thing that we know for sure is that when it comes to how we serve today's students, we have to make sure that we are looking at the needs of the students first. And to make sure we are looking at the needs of the students first, we have to know who they are and how they interact, how they move through, how they feel about being at these campuses. And so one thing that I think you can do, others could do, no matter where you are, no matter what the diverse background of your campus may or may not look like, I always urge campus leaders to be armed with data. Sounds kind of wonky, but it really, really does matter. Having data, having evidence, having the facts makes a difference. I always say data-driven decision making. So right now, people are quick to say, oh, this didn't work at this campus. Oh, this didn't work. But did you make that decision and ground it in data first? So one thing that all campus leaders should do is collect and use disaggregated data. I can't stress the importance of disaggregated data enough. I have a mentor who used to always say, you can't fix what you can't see. And without disaggregated data, we really can't see the patterns and how it impacts students from different income groups, different genders, different racial groups, etc. You were talking a little bit, I spoke about this too, about, these enrollment declines. It's on everybody's minds, right? It's very important for lots of reasons. And when you look at the enrollment declines, you will see that the declines have been happening for about a decade now. But the most dramatic plunge occurred during the pandemic. It's now beginning to stabilize a bit, but it occurred during the pandemic. And during that moment alone, we lost about 1 million students, 1 million students during the pandemic. But when you disaggregate that data, it shines a light and it spotlights the fact that over the last 10 years, nearly 600,000 of the students that we lost were Black students alone. So that's something to think about, 600,000. So collecting and using good data is essential. But I will add that the numbers by themselves will not create the change we need. That requires people. And we have to really work on making sure that people's hearts and minds are really engaged and committed to the service of students. Like the book says, becoming a student-ready campus. We got to be equity-centered, we got to be student-centered, and we really have to make sure that everyone on the campus community recognizes their role in using data, using it to drive decision-making, using it to serve students, and making sure that we are doing this in a collaborative and a connected way will actually help us to improve many of the outcomes we desire.
Absolutely.
That's a very interesting and a good way of thinking about it. When we think about context, one question I always have, and I'm just wondered if I could get your thoughts just a little bit on this, is how local does the context have to be? Is this something where we can learn a lot from other, for example, at Florida, from other AAU research intensive institutions? Or is it so localized that, and it's something that I'm not sure right now, because it seems like a lot of people are dealing on their own, and yet they're looking for solutions from others.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm always left with this issue of how much can I learn from others, and how much do I have to really just seek locally to find the answers to these things. I know that right now Florida has spent a lot of time looking locally, and depending on, they depend on people like me to lead initiatives about fairness in assessment or something like that. And when I look at that, I wonder, is this something that really would have been better or could have been shared pretty broadly, at least with other research intensive types of institutions that I think are doing many of the similar kinds of things?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I certainly don't think that you have to look locally. In the context of Florida, there's certainly things that are occurring within the state that matters for all institutions in Florida. But, as you mentioned, the AAU schools, there's a lot that you have in common with those schools, more so maybe in terms of demographics and profile and the way you operate than you might have with, say, the community college down the street. So, I'm a fan of really like figuring out where you can see some similarities and using that to sort of, make the comparisons and the necessary improvements. Many years ago, I was speaking at an event in Vermont, and was talking about, a variety of student success related things. And I gave one school an example of a college in California. And they, I remember the person came up to me afterwards and they're like, can't you find an example that was a little bit closer to home? Well, of course I could. But the reason I didn't was because when you looked at the profile, the finances, the governance structure of this school in Vermont, it was identical to the school in California. And the school in California was doing much better. Granted, states are different, all of that, but just looking at the campus. And so I would really encourage people to just not think, local grown is the only way to go. There are lots of collaboratives that I think are doing this by looking at similar types of institutional structures. The higher education associations are one way of looking at this. There's the University Innovation Alliance. Many of the historically Black colleges and universities have formed collaboratives among themselves to look at their own institutional needs. Yeah, I think it's a really great question, and that's the short answer to, and I've already gone probably too long, is that really you've got to make sure that the campus context match, and then make those comparisons. And I think you would learn a lot, probably make some new collaborations in the process.
Right. We've also recently developed and been using an assessment of what the diversity initiatives are happening on campuses. Mm-hmm. And so once we start also thinking about what we can learn from others, it also sort of brings me back to your original question of I bet you there are probably lots of useful shared data collections that would be worth considering to really understand what we can learn from each other. So
I agree. That's right.
Absolutely. And before we leave, just one more, really, I encourage people, if they haven't read the book yet, Becoming a Student Ready College. It's important because especially in these times where budgets are also suffering, things are getting tighter with the enrollments being down for many institutions. It has to become a reprioritization among the cabinet and the leadership of what is going to be funded and what matters. So I'm hoping that when they listen to your expertise, your advice today, that they remember to prioritize and somehow squeeze those dollars to make sure that DEI is something at the top of the list. So
That's right. Looking at equity-centered initiatives that work for today's students. And that's really what the book's about, like honing in on who are today's students, what do they need, how do we best serve them. I think that is going to be the difference in making some campuses very successful in this era and others probably less.
So, well, thank you so much. We know you're busy. We appreciate it very much. Your words.
Oh, I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.